like Amanda is going to be here soon and can at least hear. So Board of School Directors meeting called to order at 8:36 on August 18th. First order is public comment, and part of the screen is blocked off, but there is no one in the audience here, but I do see there are a couple people on the Zoom. So please raise your hand on Zoom if you want to talk. I think Shabnam wants to, because she emailed earlier. Great. Floor is yours. And please remember to introduce yourself for the, I guess it's no longer Orca, but for the Orca/Zoom audience.
Great. Hi, everyone. Shabnam Beth Nolan. Pronouns are she, her. It's been a while since I've seen most of you, so thanks for having me give public comment. I am going to try as much as I can to be as brief as I can, recognizing how short the public comment period is, but just want to qualify that by saying that there's a lot I will be leaving out for the sake of brevity, so happy to either talk one-on-one or come back if there's or answer questions or anything if there's additional questions or information that you want. So the reason that I came tonight is that I wanted to share a little bit about my experience at the end of this last school year, which is actually, I am learning more and more as I talk to more families, reflective of many families' experience. And that has to do with the special education and the way in which we are denying parents who are seeking evaluations and deterring them from seeking evaluations for their children. Academic evaluations, special education evaluations. So last year, I knew that my oldest child was behind grade level in reading. I find myself to be an educated, well-resourced parent who generally knows my rights and who is able to find information easily. And I spent all year meeting with my son's teachers, asking for progress, asking how he was doing. I was told all along the way he was doing better, he was making gains and improvements. I was never provided with any data. And 2 weeks prior to the end of the school year, and this is where there does seem to be a trend that is not just me. 2 weeks prior to the school year is when the teachers decided to share information with me that they think he's so far behind that he now needs to be on an educational support team or an EST plan. So we met special educator for the school district as well as a number of other educators and administrative officials for Uden Elementary. And I asked for the data. They went back and they looked at the data. The data has shown that over the course of the last year, not only did he not improve, he actually went down in percentage for both of the reading evaluations, the STARS assessment, as well as the FNP or something, evaluation, that he went from 21% to something like 17 to 7 to 4%. That was the first time I received any of that information. And like I said, I had been asking questions all along, meeting with the teacher all along. I talked with Ryan Harity at the time after having seen that data and being very upset about it, who said he had actually flagged Aiden mid-year with the teachers and asked what's going on given his data. Nobody ever gave me that information. And the teacher said, we've got it. And that was the end of that. So 2 weeks before school gets out, I'm presented with all of this information. And I have a meeting with the school and other folks who I then make a formal request to have a full academic special education evaluation and I was denied it. Even though, and I have emails that show such, that the data showed literally the words used, urgent intervention needed. That was also true for speech. His speech was identified as being unable to say the R sound. I was told the previous year that they thought he had some potential speech delay with the R sound, but that was normal for it to develop last. They did a quick assessment, which they have no record of, that said we'll reevaluate next year. So they also had the speech therapist for the school evaluate his speech. The speech therapist for the school found that he was delayed in the R controlled sound, but that it's the last to develop, and so we'll check again in 4th grade. I want to be clear that I've talked to a number of interventionists as well as speech therapists who all told me it is not normal for a 9-year-old to be unable to say the R sound. I then was dissatisfied with the school speech therapist's evaluation. I went and got a private evaluation at CVMC, which again, I have the data for and the report for that said he cannot correct it without intervention, and he was at the urgent intervention level again for speech. So I'm sharing all of this information with you because the level, I am an engaged parent. I'm a parent who knew that my child was struggling with reading, who was reading with him at home, who gave him every book he possibly could ask for, who regularly engaged with the teacher. To be told 2 weeks before school that your child has a severe problem, he's a year behind in reading level, urgent intervention on all assessments, the trends have been going down for the last year, and we're denying you an evaluation. And the reason, when I talked to an unnamed administration official, because I was so upset about it, was, it's been a hard year for the teachers, and it's 2 weeks before school ends and they're tired. That was the reason I was given by a top administration official at UES for why my child, who had been identified as needing severe urgent intervention, wasn't going to get services, and that they would reevaluate again in the fall. I then spent $120 a week because, not necessarily because that's money I am able to spend, but because I felt I needed to because the school failed at serving me and my child, $120 a week to do literacy intervention tutoring for my child, just so he wouldn't get further behind during the school year or during the summer. I could not afford to, in addition to that, do what was going to be $300 to $400 of out-of-pocket expense for my family per session for speech therapy. The speech therapist, like I said, at CVMC said he will not correct the sound without intervention. He needs intervention. I could not afford to do so. Fast forward, I am the one who is now having to quite aggressively initiate ensuring that Aiden gets an EST plan, that the services are set up, and that he is going to have intervention. I think we all know, especially if you're an educator and in education, that you learn to read up to 3rd grade and then you read to learn after that. And my child, quite frankly, was failed by the school district. And I racked my brain as to what else I could have done to ensure that he wasn't behind, and I'm falling short of any sort of explanation because I was engaged. I asked questions. I was told progress was made, and it was only 2 weeks before school let out that I was told, oh, actually, no, he's a year behind, and we're not going to give you any services for the rest of the school year or for the summer. I recognize that it's been a very difficult year for teachers. That does not fall short. I understand that. But my child didn't learn core information in literacy, that phonics, basic phonics skills that would have been taught in those early periods of the pandemic when they went immediately to remote learning. And he wasn't taught that information. No teacher stepped backwards and realized or assessed that he needed to learn that basic information. Instead, what they did last year was make accommodations for him so they didn't have to teach him the core basic skills. and just let him slide through. So now we're trying to catch up. And I'm sharing all of this with you because, like I said, as I have shared what's happening with me, I have heard other parents who've gone, oh my God, that's exactly what happened to me. And I even know a parent who a similar thing happened. She requested an evaluation of the teacher because you know what? Parents don't know this information. They don't know their rights around this stuff. She asked the teacher, I really think my child needs an evaluation. The teacher told around, and she has emails to show it, no, I don't think he would qualify. That is simply unacceptable. What that teacher should have done is say, you as a parent have a right to request an evaluation, and here is the name of the person you should request it of. Instead, what that teacher did at Union was tell her no, which to me questions of borderline illegal, actually, quite frankly. So I have heard that there are several families who have been told about 2 weeks prior to the school year ending, you know what, your kid is really behind. The majority of those have been in literacy. And then they're told, sorry, maybe next year we can work on it. So I certainly, as you all know, could run around spinning my wheels, trying to get every single story, every single family to show up and to talk to you all about the same thing happening to them. But I am like drowning in just trying to get my kid the intervention that he is awarded as a public school member, that I barely have time and to pull together other stories. I've heard from educators in our school district that I have had conversations with who have said, you're not the only family this is happening to, and we wonder if it's going to take legal action before the school district does anything to course correct their denial evaluations for kids who should be getting evaluated for special education. I've talked to other educators who have said there is a severe inequity happening between Montpelier, Union, and Roxbury elementary schools because of the way we have set up special education, where the special educators, and I realize there's a special educator being hired at Roxbury, but where special educators are traveling and there's a difference between the virtual and in person, and there's inherent inequities happening in our special education program for elementary aged children because of the way we have them set up. So what all of this points to, and the reason I'm talking with you, is that I believe that there might be a systemic problem with special education in our school district. I will do the work I need to do to prove that to you if I need to prove it to you, but quite frankly, I believe that it is the board's responsibility to connect to the community that they represent, to hear me share this information with you, and then to do some work, to reach out to the community and see if this is in fact a systemic problem. So my ask of you as school board members is to talk to your community. Ask, solicit, and find out more information about what you just heard from me and whether or not it's happening to other families, and whether or not policies that you as the board are responsible for are in fact being circumvented, and that we are not serving children who should be served both morally and legally by this school district for special education. So there's a lot of people getting denied and deterred from even getting an evaluation, which is actually within their legal right to do. So I'll just end by saying this has been very difficult for me, emotionally, financially, time-wise, like to have to be fighting so hard to get my child what he is supposed to already receive as part of his education in a school district. And I really hope that you all will take it upon yourselves to further look into whether or not this is happening to more families than mine. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, we really appreciate sharing your experience. Any other public comment? Anyone else on Orca? No. Yeah, thank you. And one thing I just want to mention, I think it's implicit. Well, talk briefly. We were talking more next time about a deep dive into community outreach, but I just want to maybe take a couple of minutes on the agenda, and we could do it after the consent agenda, just to talk about, I think, the need to do some research kind of in preparation for the budget to, start thinking about groups and networks we can all reach out to now that we can, especially now that we can do a little more in person and, discussing what their needs are and really doing some, I think, deep listening. So we can talk about it more at the next meeting. We have time on it, but I just wanted to get people thinking about groups and kind of liaisons to those groups that they have on mind. Emma?
Could we also discussion and potential vote around the email from earlier,
Yes.
the superintendent, giving the superintendent authority to write emergency plans?
Yep. Let's put those two items after the consent agenda.
And one other, the wording of policies.
Sure.
What'd you say, Andrew?
We'll get there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask folks to speak a little louder? Because I
think we're gonna move.
hard to hear them, but then I can't hear them.
Yeah. Is that better?
Yeah, we'll turn it back on or something, but that will help a lot.
Yeah. Just a reminder to people to, project.
I wonder if people on Zoom too, like Jerry, how is the volume for you?
The volume is perfect.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
And I was just, earlier today, we had a policy committee meeting, and we're going to be proposing to refer two policies over to the finance committee. So I just asked him about that's the agenda.
All right. So just so we're clear, and do you think we can do these quickly? Because I don't want to keep Andrew and Grant here any longer. So after the consent agenda, just community outreach, just touch on it quickly, so it's on people's radar. And then we do have space on the agenda for the next meeting to do a deeper dive on that. Libby's request for, which he probably always has, but just to make clear, authority to take necessary COVID safety measures. And then the reference of, is it the two budget policies?
Yeah.
Yeah, reference of two budget policies from the policy committee to the budget and finance committee. So we'll have this after the consent agenda, which brings me to the consent agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move to approve the consent agenda.
Is there anything you want to take off the consent agenda and discuss me at it?
I wanted to pull the
Yes.
superintendent's report just
Okay.
briefly, and if we could
Okay.
discuss.
Do you want to amend me as I knew
So
someone
I
else knew that
approve the
rather than-
consent agenda while just pulling the superintendent's report for discussion.
All right, excellent. Do you have a second?
I second that.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Kristen?
Yeah, I just want to thank you for your report, which I can see that there's some difficult vacancies, and that was a week ago. And I wondered if in the past 7 days, if there was any, improvements and filling of some really important spaces. I know that like our food service, our bus drivers, I mean, these are all critical positions that make school days tick. And so I'm curious if there's been any filling of the positions.
The bus company does have all the bus drivers. However, we've had to move start times in a few schools, well, in one school, so that the bus driver can make a run and then make another run directly after it for another school building. So we have had to adjust some start times. So there's a domino there that could tumble, but right now we have bus drivers. And our food service, Grant and I with Jim Birmingham, who's our food service manager, had some frank discussions about salary, and the board has decided a while ago to each year increase the food service salaries, and to get to a $15 minimum. We moved that up 3 years. So this year, starting salary was supposed to be $13.30. So yesterday, 2 days ago, I authorized moving our starting salary to $15. So it gave most of our food service workers about a 13% pay increase. So we did it across the board, of course. Jim was able to interview 2 people today that he's hopeful about for food service assistants. We still have 2 manager positions open and I think 2 other assistant positions open. One of our food manager positions is, unfortunately, one of our food managers had a horrible sickness this summer and he's had to take a full year off to recover from that. So it was unexpected. Another one resigned mid-year last year and Jim was covering it. So we're still looking for food service manager. If we can get the 2 new hires in, if you can get them to come work with us, then he was much more hopeful today. If not, if we still have this hole, then the 3 individuals you see in this room will be brown bagging it again, like we did with closure. And we will be offering brown bag lunches that get delivered to the school buildings. It's not going to be anything special, just because we don't have the capacity to do it. So we do have a plan B if we don't get the people we need. But right now there's just nobody applying for it. So we're hoping with a new salary increase and the unemployment coming to an end soon, that we might get some more people to apply for these gigs. As far as IAs, haven't had any luck hiring any more IAs. We're still down 6. And what we've had to do is a lot of involuntary transfers. So people who are used to being general IAs we have to cover all our IEP needs. So they're now going to be attached to a kid. So all kid IEP needs are taken care of at the moment. However, this decreases playground aids, cafeteria, all of those kind of needs that we have. So we got creative and we talked with our folks at Part 2, who's our after school program and at UES, and hit on some of them, said, hey, you want to work some longer hours during the day and we'll pay for it. So we got 2 takers there. So hopefully that will help things a bit at UES because they have the most needs with playground responsibilities and that kind of thing. So it's in a slightly better position than it was a week ago, but we are still in need of food service and instructional assistants. Pretty big time. We're not alone in that either. It's big across the state for those particular positions. And there are many soups who are telling me that they haven't filled their teaching positions yet either. So we're not in that boat, but these are necessary positions for us. So we're hoping that we find more people who are interested.
So that may be compounding the problem as well, right? If it's across the board.
Across the state.
Yeah,
I mean, it's across restaurants, it's
Yeah.
across everything, right?
Yeah, so it just snowballs from there, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks,
Hello?
Logan.
The instructional assistants, that's an entry-level position, no training necessary?
Right.
And the food service managers, does that require a special license or anything?
No.
Okay.
So if you know anybody who's interested, we'd love to have them join our team.
Yeah. I'll try to spread the word.
Excellent jobs for people who want to have like hours of school age kids.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Do we have postings online that we might be able to?
Oh yeah, Anna's got shared, if you look on our social media, we've shared it there, we've shared it across the bridge, the world, we've shared it in multiple places. I think I said in my superintendent's report, we've tried to call the Department of Labor. We're getting 0 responses from the Department of Labor. We've reached out to refugee organizations, but the challenge is that there aren't, that's why I was asking you that one day about refugee organizations. The challenge is most of the people who are looking for work as refugees are in Burlington, and there's a transportation challenge there. So we've reached out to many different places. So hopefully we get some luck.
Yeah, no, thanks for the update. So we need to have a motion to approve the superintendent's report.
I'll make a motion to approve the superintendent's report.
Do a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. So let's go quickly do those 3 items on community outreach. I think with some of the listening sessions we've had around the ESSER funds have brought up some of the issues, and we obviously, I think, heard a slice of some of the concerns with what Shabnam just laid out. I've heard similar kind of murmurs through the community as well. And also, this is just something we've done generally around budget time, is reach out to the community, see what community needs are. I think with the ESSER funds, we've got some kind of spending resources and flexibility we didn't have before. I talked to Ahmad about this, was it yesterday? Days are blurring. And one of the things we thought is that a good way to shape this, we can give this some thought, would be just to really reach out and see what the concerns of the community are and not get too caught up in which buckets can be spent on what. Because we are heading into the budget season where we can think kind of holistically about the budget. So those are just kind of initial thoughts. We can do a little deeper dive, including maybe some assignments about people taking on groups and liaisons to reach out to. But I just wanted to put it out there so people can think about it before next meeting. And then if anyone has quick comments now, we can have a quick discussion. But.
Yeah, that sounds really good. I'm glad that we're thinking that way. Great to reach out.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to propose that maybe for next meeting, some of us can bring a plan of like, this is what it will look like, just like for your connections that you have, and like, so that we can kind of do a map of here are the groups that we can talk to, and here are like who can commit to some of those meetings, and we could be maybe outdoor mask somewhere or like via Zoom, and really do outreach with like some of the groups that are in Montpelier that are not necessarily like the education ones, but like that can help us kind of reach out. I mean, and so I'll be happy to come up with some proposals of like ideas that have been actually brought up here, like coffee on the green, or like in the coffee shop, and like coffee with the board members, and come and like talking and be able to analyze it that way.
I also think we should think outside of just groups. I think we should think about how do we make ourselves accessible to individuals who might not be associated with a specific group or with a special interest and association, and making sure we create spaces for that kind of work.
Yeah, no, definitely, and you also probably want to think about the broader community too, because there are members of the community who are not as directly tied to the schools too.
And do those types of sort of community outreach meetings, if there's not a quorum of us, they don't have to be warned, or how does that work?
If there's not a quorum, then you're fine to meet with community members. Yep.
Yeah, and we have had some in the past where we've had more than a quorum, and the answer there was just nobody says anything. It's just
The
a
answer
pure,
is what, sorry?
is a pure listening session. I mean, there were some things led by
Right, gotcha.
like FOMS where they organized it, and more than a quorum of board members showed up, and the board members just had to stay silent and not discuss anything. But you can go there and listen.
Jim, one thing, you got to pull the finance committee report, or the fourth quarter report, because the finance committee wasn't able to meet on that.
Okay.
Oh, it was on the consent agenda.
Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Ooh.
I
Okay.
forgot to remind you that earlier.
Okay, so let's just have a motion to unapprove
The fourth quarter
the fourth quarter report.
I move to unapprove the financial report until after the finance committee has reviewed it.
I'll second that.
That sounds really official.
Yes. All those in favor?
Aye.
Yeah, any opposed? Great. So let's move on to Livy's request. Do you want to make it so I don't paraphrase it? Everything's pretty
I just want to
straightforward.
be clear, what is the expectation of us for the next board meeting around community outreach? Just
I
come
think
with some ideas?
Just come up with
Okay.
some ideas, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Now I know what my homework is.
Do you guys want to send it to me, and then I'll come up with something that has it all together instead of us something individually? And then we could
Oh, we
discuss
email
that.
you our ideas between now and the next board meeting?
Yeah, would that work?
That's fine with
And
me.
then I come up with a little
List,
overview. Yeah.
perfect.
So it has been advised, is it okay to move on?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So we've been strongly, there's a strong recommendation from our Secretary of Education that also came last year. So the board did this role last year as well. For the board to make a decision around safety protocols with COVID. And the two choices are the board decides safety precautions around COVID, or you authorize me to make those decisions as the superintendent. So if there's discussion around that, I'm happy to answer any questions around it, or somebody could make either motion for that, for
It's
one of those
also-
two things.
Sorry, I read through the memorandum.
Yep.
And the way that the board would have to make those decisions is by writing a policy.
Yes.
It would be very clunky and slow and
Yeah.
inefficient, and I would not vote in favor of that.
No, I'm ready for someone to make the motion to give Libby the authority to make those decisions.
Why do you make?
So
the motion
moved.
Because I didn't write the motion.
I make the motion to have Libby.
Authorize?
To authorize Libby to make decisions about COVID precautions this school year.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And then the final is either Amanda or Andrew is reference of two
Yes.
budget-related policies to the Budget and Finance Committee, basically for the purpose of ensuring that they are compliant.
Yeah, there was some updated language from AOE. I mean, Grant could explain this better than anybody else, why this is needed. Is it all right if we ask him as part of this? Grant, can you just really briefly explain why these changes are necessary to the budget execution and fiscal management policies, two separate policies?
Sure. A lot of the changes that the AOE is telling us we need to make sure that are in place are with procedure. But before I go down that road to work on the procedures, I just wanted to make sure that our policies are updated. There's only a few things like updated references, like federal CFR regulations that need to be updated in there. A lot of it is just archaic language that refers back to whenever we used to have policy governance. So there's references to this policy governance and that policy governance, which they don't exist anymore. So a lot of it is just real small cleanup items and then attaching new references. So it's not much on those two policies, but that will then guide the way for us to make the nitty-gritty changes to the procedures. And the key there is to get those procedures in line before anybody would come down and look at how we spent federal money, because they could come down and look and say, you weren't in compliance with this procedure, or this procedure wasn't up to par. And then those expenses could be ruled disallowed. And if that's the case, we would have to turn that money back in and absorb it out of our local funds. So that's the reason. But you won't see a lot of big stuff in the policies. It's just a few things to clean those up before we get into the details, which you don't have to get mired into because those are procedural.
Thank you for that. So since the finance committee is meeting, we would like to fast track this to ensure that our policies and procedures are in compliance. Well, that we're in compliance with our policies and that we're in compliance with federal law. We want to fast track this. Doesn't mean that we can't go back in the future and amend it to add other things, but we want to deal with this as soon as possible. So since the finance committee is meeting with Grant before next meeting anyways, we were talking at the policy committee meeting about referring these two policies to the finance committee, extending that meeting a little bit so that the finance committee can review these policies in advance, talk with Grant about it, and then make a recommendation to the board, because we're going to have to do 3 readings of these policies. So even if we get this to the board at the second meeting in September, it won't be until the end of October that we have passed this. So I'm going to propose now that we refer the budget execution policy and fiscal management policy to the finance committee to update and bring to the board.
Is that it? Any discussion?
I just want to see if I can understand what's happening. See if I can translate what Grant just said, which is that in order for Grant to do what he needs to do throughout our budget process by following certain procedures, we need to update our policies so that Grant can then update procedures.
When the,
There's
what-
also, if you're audited for federal dollars, they audit your compliance with their own policies.
right.
Yeah.
And right
Okay.
now, our own policies are a little bit antiquated
Yeah, they're
on
not.
this front. And
Right, so they could look at those and say, you're not following 1A3, but 1A3 isn't applicable anymore, so why would we follow it? But so we should just get rid of 1A3. I'm just making up that.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
that's one
Okay.
example.
Yeah.
Or if he's gonna update our financial procedures, based on the guidance from AOE, and that those procedures would be discordant with our current policy, we want to make sure that we update that policy
Absolutely.
right now as he's updating those procedures so that everything is cohesive.
Yeah, and we have references to, my understanding is we have references to, regulations that no longer exist.
Okay, thanks.
All those in favor?
Hi.
Any opposed? Well, thank you, Andrew and Grant, for being patient. So now we can move on to facilities. And I'm not sure exactly how it's going to be structured, but I'm assuming you guys can take the floor.
Yep, I'm going to open us up and then Kristen's going to add some things to what I say. So, because we met with the facilities committee last night. So Andrew and Kristen are well versed in this PowerPoint presentation. So originally this board meeting was dedicated to talking more about how we are going to spend ESSER $3. Okay, that was the original intent of this board meeting. However, since lots of new information has come to light, we've gotten some initial feedback from very few community members. That whole conversation about how specifically to use ESSER $3, we're on hold with that right now. However, you're going to see the term ESSER 3 today because it is a funding source. Okay, but how the purpose of today is not to go dig deep into how we spend specifically ESSER 3 money. So that's on hold. We got a lot of feedback around waiting until we get our students back to see where they are academically and social emotionally. We want to look at that. We want to learn more about where our students are. And we also want to wait about the decisions coming out of Washington in terms of infrastructure and budget reconciliation that's happening right now. So the board is aware of that, but I just want to make sure it's clear that that's not the purpose of this conversation today, so that we don't go down rabbit holes around that. We're actually working, Anna and I are just starting to work with a group called Thought Exchange, which also, I was thinking about this for community engagement for budget process. It's a pretty cool tool to use that goes beyond general surveys. So we have, Anna and I are setting up meetings with the people at Thought Exchange to get a membership with them to design a better process for community engagement. It's a very helpful tool that collects data in a much different way than a typical Google survey might. So we're pretty excited about that. I know other districts around the state are using it. And we kind of got a demo the other day in a conversation we had about school opening with the people at Thought Exchange. And so we're going to dig into that and change the whole process about how we get community engagement. So I just want to put that out there that this is not about how we spend ESSER $3 today. One of the major goals of the board, as you all know, is to collaborate with the administration to determine how we continue to develop our facilities. So our spaces allow for really powerful learning opportunities for years to come. And so tonight we'd like the board to consider this presentation, and this is totally Kristen's word here, and I loved it, as a brainstorming session towards this goal of how we continue to use our facilities and how we continue to grow our facilities so they match the learning needs of our kids. So we asked the board to stay at that 20,000 foot level of brainstorming tonight with us. And we hope this discussion will help us, the administrators, prioritize some of these needs and wants and desires and opportunities and help the board in your conversations with the community as you go out go out and do. So Kristen, do you want to add anything to that?
Sure. Well, thanks for meeting with us last night. It was great to get a preview. So thank you, Francis and Libby. Just get a sense of, yeah, I mean, just all that is really possible. I mean, like Libby said, this is like a big flyover. And, you know, our role is really going to be able to provide feedback. And I think in part why I'm being tapped to maybe provide some, you know, some insider perspective is because I am an educator and I spend a lot of my days inside of school buildings and, you know, just really getting to experience what that looks and feels like. You know, my favorite parts of the day are like getting, you know, delegated to lunch duty or just like being out in the halls, and you really get to feel, you know, the pulse of what it means to be a student in a school and see how they really interact with the space. You know, as a teacher, you maybe get the chance to, you know, soften your space with color and, you know, some fabric and some light and things like that. But, you know, what we're really talking about tonight is this, you know, one time, you know, a couple different buckets of money, but potentially, you know, a one-time infusion of infrastructure or facilities, you know, specific funding through the infrastructure bill that I know Andrew and Grant are going to talk about, to really rethink some expired spaces. I think that's probably fair to say. And this opportunity to really rethink how they're used and to really think about our buildings from the perspective as something that really pushes curriculum and can sort of be the origin of curriculum. And that, you know, our facilities really are like, have the opportunity to be a representation of the pedagogy of our staff and the vision of this board. And this community. I know that, you know, there's kind of a lot of things happening concurrently, you know, the visioning process and there's this, you know, a lot of different funding streams coming through, but they're all very much connected. And so I guess I just want to urge us to really be thinking about, you know, how our buildings are really have the potential to really push our curriculum and what education looks like and community opportunities look like via our facilities. So thank you so much.
All right. We learned last night that Kristen has beautiful phrases that we all want to steal now. Yeah, exactly. All right, go ahead, Andrew, you're on.
Are you going to run the clicker? Who's got the, oh, you are. Oh,
My
you
right
got it.
arm over there is
Okay.
going to run the clicker.
Thanks.
This is just a reminder that the board had a report from Andrew around facilities as a whole on March 1st, and that's a link to that report, so it's at your fingertips if you need it. So.
And that'll be once all the summer work is completed, we'll be updating that and having that available earlier in the year this year. So hopefully for budget season. So yeah, and I was really pleased that Kristen was able to join us last night and add those words, because one of the things that I think that the enthusiasm of these projects, a lot of is because we're still at 20,000 feet, I think we can kind of think of them like, oh, we're just going to fix that space up. That's not what we're thinking. We're looking at transforming these spaces. We had a once in a lifetime opportunity to really transform these spaces and teach differently in them. So we're still up here, so we don't have any specifics on that, but I think that's a great backdrop. Some of these items are just operational and just good things to do. So, but these are some of those big picture things that if we had the money, what could we take care of? You know, we sit in some rooms in these schools and they're in great shape and they serve us well. These are some of the ones that we should keep have been out there. So Roxbury, we'll start with Roxbury Village. The Roxbury Village School, ever since that building came under our control, the town hall portion of it, very important. And the idea of being able to make that space for the community handicapped accessible, as well as separated off from the rest of the school building, just as good practice, so that the public isn't just wandering through the building during evening events, has been just a project that's been on our radar. And I apologize, my mask is going all over the place.
Spread out if you want to take it off during the presentation, you can. And to be clear, the building itself is ADA accessible.
Yes.
In order to get to the community space, which is the town hall, which you see right here, that front doorway is not accessible. So in order for somebody to access the town hall, they have to walk through the school building part in order to get there.
Right. And create bathrooms and really be able to isolate. Just really good practice, and it would be a good thing for the community and the school building as well. So that's a project that has always been outstanding down there at Roxbury. And what I'll do is I'll roll through the schools and then you can ask questions on the individual schools. But I think that's another need that or desire that's been expressed down at Roxbury for a while has been some covered outdoor space for the students and community. A gazebo was proposed a couple of years ago. There has been a little change in that there's a potential community park going in across the street, which may or may not contain a gazebo or some sort of outdoor space for gathering. But again, just an outdoor classroom, a different opportunity to teach differently, as well as get the kids out of the standard classroom. Again, an opportunity down there. One of the things that, you might expect, there's lots more projects. These are the projects that we otherwise couldn't really, and you'll see in the facilities report, needs to be upgraded casework down at Roxbury. That's kind of stuff we could fit into our usual budget and usually take care of. These were kind of the big pieces that really wouldn't typically go into a normal school budget. Union Elementary, the windows. We are in the throes of finishing up our beta test of some different options that I'll come back to you with more detail on. There's a whole slew of concerns there. We've got comfort of the kids in the building. We've got control over mechanical systems. We've got aesthetics. There's a whole lots of reasons to do that. And safety. Energy. It's kind of a no-brainer. We've got to do something. We are approaching having a solution for that. That's a big chunk. So that's yes. At UES, we have what we refer to as the multi-purpose room, and anybody who's had kids in the district would know it as the Four Winds room. It's larger than a regular classroom with a couple of rooms on the end. It's probably equivalent of 2 classrooms. It just sort of is there. And with thinking about how we want to teach, what we want to do in these extracurricular spaces, this is a great opportunity, and it's needed. Special education office suite. I designed many of these in my day, and I can absolutely sit in my mind and have the conversation that designed this space when they did it 25, 30 years ago. And it's not how we want to deliver services moving forward. That needs to be updated, and there's a lot of conversations of what that looks like, how that serves the students, how that serves the staff as well. We also, there's a domino effect to this in that, these aren't isolated. There's other spaces near it, and if we did that, what if we did this and moved that? And so there's sort of opportunities that roll throughout that building. But that's a space that definitely needs to be upgraded. The little gym, again, any of you who have had kids that go through UES are familiar with this. It's used as a little gym, rainy days, overflow. Again, we need to make that a proper space, simple, and think about how we, like right now it's just a big classroom, so we have them go in there and do their things. Well, if it's going to be an athletic space or a movement space or whatever, do we have the right flooring? Do we have the right materials? Do we have the right infrastructure for swings or whatever other things that we can get in there to support the students? So that's a big need over there. Here's one that's a staff workroom. It's just not, I don't think it's the atmosphere that we want to present to our staff. It's just really old. It's run down. It wasn't well executed when it was first put in there. And I think as just the basic needs of meeting the needs of being able to make a cup of coffee without a doorknob falling off and use a restroom without being skeeved out, it should be upgraded. And there's other opportunities that we can put into this, a small laundry that would help the building if they needed it, things of that nature. But again, you start talking bathrooms and kitchens, it goes beyond just let's put it in the budget this year. The auditorium, that's a space that is really a wild card in that it's going to be fabulous when it's done. The good thing about it is it's historic. We're not going to change it a lot. So we have a lot of latitude as to what we do with it. You can see that those seats have been sitting there for nearly 100 years and they could use a coat of varnish. Do we put a coat of varnish on them, or do we do like we did here at the high school where we put padding on them? and send them out to Minnesota to have that work redone. So there's just a great variety. Again, to give that space back over and make it a really inviting space that the teachers can use. Again, anybody that's been through UES can think of the puppet shows, can think of the graduations, can think of all the cool things that the students do in that space. Would be getting that so it's more accessible. Same thing with the back of the stage, back of house. It runs the gamut from let's just make it simple and user friendly. We've got lots of equipment that we took out of the high school, knobs and switches, or do we bring it into state of the art? And there used to be, it was a little bit before my time that I recall anyway, this theater was extensively used by community theater groups. And we got a basement full of their old props to prove it. So that's a space that it's on our radar. You've seen it in the capital fund to get chipping away at that. But that's going to be a fabulous space when it's done, and the kids are going to be able to benefit from it. And the teachers are going to be able to benefit from it once it's done. Door hardware. So all of our buildings, we've done a pretty good job in the district. The high school is probably the best. Actually, let me take that back. Roxbury and Tina are the best with regards to security and ADA accessible hardware and key control. Roxbury's the best. Tina takes amazing control of, you pick up the phone and Tina will tell you exactly who's got what key and when it was returned and when it's going back out. The high school is pretty good. Main Street's okay. Union, not so much. If you go down and you see Chris and Randy and those down there, they got a ring of keychains, a ring of keys. We need to have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 keys that someone can easily get to, open a door, lock a door, make sure they're all handicapped accessible. That's a big project. There's a lot of doors in a school, and good quality hardware that isn't going to feel like junk is expensive. But to know you can lock a door, anybody can lock the door and unlock a door that they should in a quickly is valuable. Any questions about Union or other?
Well, I had one about our RVS, which is
Sure.
the gazebo. Is that proposed or does that gazebo exist? The picture you
It does
showed,
not.
it's
Oh,
proposed.
that's just a.
Okay. And so for, maybe these are just more like ideas than questions, but the multi-purpose room, are there considerations around how to use that space for social, emotional, and behavioral?
That's
Is that what
the
you
next.
mean by
That's
21st century.
Yeah, we're
learning
still at
environment?
20, and there's absolutely, Libby, stop me when I'm wrong. We will absolutely bring in professionals and our staff and our administrators to think about, okay, you've been making do with this space. What do we do that makes this space 20 years from now, have people look back on it and go, yeah, this was the right thing to do. And what are the needs that we can't address in the ice cube tray classrooms we have now? We talked a little bit during the community engagement, workstations that you can stand up at, activities that are not just sitting at your desk doing this, that are moving around and up and down and over and soft flooring and whatever it needs to be.
Mhm.
That's the exciting stuff that we're not at yet, but most certainly we want to leave this place better than we found it. And these are the kind of things that we can do. These are the kind of spaces.
The special ed office, do students go in there now the way it is?
Yeah,
Oh, man.
and it's for kids with intensive special needs, it's extreme sensory overload.
That's terrible. Yeah.
It's not what we need.
No, I get it. And then I had the same question about the little gym about just the SBL considerations or sensory adaptations.
Right.
And it sounds like, yeah.
Absolutely.
that's exactly what we're thinking
And
about.
again, I don't want to get too excited about this stuff, but we need a gym athletic space, but one that's quiet. There's going to be kids that there's maybe kids that we want to have a space that's nice and quiet. They can still do the physical activities, but it isn't echoing throughout the
Right.
space. And how do we treat the walls to do that and still make them durable that you can
Right.
throw a basketball against them?
And then my last one is, it's not necessarily the facility itself, but another thing to think about, or maybe this doesn't fall into this category, is those wiggle seats. Again, to the same.
Furnishings, the same thing. The only reason that,
Furnishings, okay.
quite honestly, the only reason I haven't put furnishing on there is in my experience as an architect and dealing with bond votes and stuff like that, rarely do we get funding from the federal government or the state that says, yeah, you can buy furnishings with it. But I can guarantee you, if the librarian had their choice, we'd all be wiggling right now in this room. Or doing something, you know, we wouldn't be just sitting in standard chairs. So that's hopefully when they say infrastructure and all that, there'll be some flexibility in that. It doesn't have to be bolted to the wall.
We
And it's
also
just,
have furniture budget lines.
yes.
Yep.
You know, that's in our local budget.
Yeah.
Because I've seen it in the classrooms in UES that there are some, but it seems like kids have to take turns on them. And so if there's a way to get more, obviously not every child maybe wants to sit in one, but it looked to me like more than there were available.
And that's one of the great things that we've seen here, these opportunities, is it's, you know, by having these potential funds that Grant's going to talk about, it allows us to maybe just take a little money over here so we can increase that furnishing budget, so we can kit out an entire classroom that we otherwise couldn't afford in a standard budget.
Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
So did you consider any additional playground equipment for Union Elementary School?
Not specifically yet, but
I know that it's something that came up around the original, you know, years-long project to get that playground. And then we ended up having to put so much money into soil mitigation and landscaping that we lost a lot of the original vision for what that playground could be. Both the small back playground and the bigger front playground.
Absolutely.
Ryan Harity told me that a lot of the equipment was cut from the budget, and that the thinking would be that it would be added back.
There was a couple pieces, absolutely.
Mostly that was the center area.
The little, the courtyard. Lower courtyard.
Yeah.
Was there a wheelchair accessible swing?
Yes, there's a handicap accessible swing up there. And bucket swing at UES.
Yeah.
Oh.
The one that's in the small playground?
No, in the bigger playground.
And there, And there's,
I guess the question around just like the draining of all the considerations around kids who are neurodiverse. Would we, is it like, have you guys considered looking into the environmental studies that are out, like for, I know that one of the parents that came to our last meeting was mentioning some of the agencies that she has worked with who go into the schools to do a report on here, all like the lights, to do more like a 360 study on all of our structures around, specifically around neurodiversity and
the state, I know if I'm thinking of, if we're talking about the same thing, you're talking like environment, like PCB and radon testing or other materials?
no,
more so
just
light
like
and
how the environment
sound.
is looking like the tables, and so
I
they
see what
come
you're
in
saying.
to look at the lights, what and think of like the different kids' sensitivity to light. So if you have a classroom that has these types of lights, they say here are the things that you can do to make this classroom better for all the kids that might have light sensitivity, or that might not be able to sit down in this. Here some like, or like these tables are too hard, and like things like that, or too many pictures on the wall.
Yeah. With regards to the existing or new or anything proposed.
Well, just like thinking like if we're up here, is that part of the up here thinking that we could get that for some of those experts to come and say, here are all the things that you have. That you can plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, we're and be it rest assured, we're not going to do this. We're not going to do this on our own. We're going to bring in the right people to help us in bring in the right people that we have here and bring in outside experts who do this sort of thing. Schools were designed around, most schools were designed around, when you look at the lights, it was when they passed the bond to build this, Kathy Hilgendorf said you needed 50-foot candles on the table. That changed to 35 because people realized that 50-foot candles at the desk was way too much. And since the state is no longer funding school bond projects, people get to do what they want a little bit. So a lot of the school buildings, things you see in school buildings are because it was mandated that way. So absolutely. Main Street Middle. Talk about the social, emotional, and I'm not good at talking about these things openly, but this is, you talk about a space that is one of the most diverse that we have in the district, is the youngest 5th grader to the oldest 8th grader sharing the same playground. And I'm not even sure that playground is the right word that we're going to end up wanting to use for this space, but it's definitely a space that needs to be thought about. And this is going to be a challenge because we can scrape the surface and do a few things on top, but once we get, that used to be a neighborhood back there. That Scribner Road used to connect out to, I forget the name of it, but there was houses and roads back there. So there's a lot lurking below those wood chips. So that potentially is a large project, but again, I think really needs to be done. We've got some resiliency spaces. Main Street Middle School is just full. So we need to take advantage of as many little spaces as we possibly can. And there really, honestly, isn't many left over there. This one particular space was put up there just because it is a unique opportunity, but there's a lot of infrastructure right there. So we can put paint to it and we can change some ceiling tiles, but to really make it into what it needs to be, or what it wants to be, is gonna probably need to move a little bit of infrastructure, which gets very pricey very quickly. But it's one of the few sort of opportunities we still have over there for additional spaces. The old family consumer science classroom. That space was, my guess is it was renovated when they did the addition back in '89 or whenever the addition was put on, the locker room. It's out of date, even if it was just a family consumer science classroom, let alone we don't really teach family consumer science anymore. And there's a real push to head towards a sustainability model of education and looking at the global picture of where food comes from, how do you prepare it, how do you take care of it, how do the rest of the world, all that sort of, and again, Libby can speak to this better, but it sort of wants to be more a lab, a learning lab that we can do all those things. It just isn't. It isn't that now. Again, it's in the lower level. There's a lot of infrastructure to deal with down there. So that's going to be it's an important piece. It's also helps the kids prepare for when they get up to the high school and what the model is with the science department and the sustainability movement here at the high school. It really going to prepare them to be more seamless and integrate back and forth. So that's a big project.
There's also links to that slide, the student sustainability presentation that the board had in late spring. Yeah.
Windows are the exact same conversation we had at Union. Safety, energy, aesthetics, operations, just having a teacher these days. We saw this a couple of days ago. It was cold in the morning and it was like this by the afternoon. And Main Street Middle, especially the Main Street side, those classrooms just are wild. And they're very difficult. Comfortable. Kids aren't comfortable, they're not going to learn well. And we need to take care of that. Big project. Cafeteria, one of the biggest challenges we have at Union.
Main Street.
Main Street. It's we try to fit 100 kids into that space. There's an upper level that you can't really see there. It's going to be a challenge. We are pretty well pinned in over at Main Street Middle. The space behind, there's no, let's just add on here without some real significant other implications. So, but the good thing about it is it's an opportunity. It's going to be, it's right now, it's a medium-sized space that we put a bunch of cafeteria tables in and we get everybody in there. If we take full advantage of that space, it could be a really interesting space. Small areas, big areas, quiet areas, loud areas. In this, it's funny how this evolves. 20 years ago, we would never, and I'm not going to, Libby's going to hate me for this, we would never say, hey, let's build some outdoor cafeteria space. We would never, ever do that. The one good thing we have at Main Street Middle is that if you look out those windows, we're surrounded on 3 sides by building. So we actually maybe have an opportunity. It doesn't help us in January, but it might help us in September and some of those. And we all know anybody's got a middle schooler. Temperature doesn't matter. They haven't worn a jacket since they were in 5th grade anyway. That's the right of going to middle school is you don't have to wear a jacket anymore. So that's one of the cool opportunities we do have, is maybe there's something out there. So
Kids are packed in that space.
they are.
And they're starting to into a lunch at
I used to eat.
Yeah. Oh, when you were a
To,
kid.
to give you a sense though, Don Taylor's classroom was in that space last year and he had 20 kids, 22 kids in his classroom, spaced 6 feet apart. And we barely could fit his class in there. We couldn't fit one more desk in that room.
It's really small space for the needs of students. Yeah.
I would, no, that's, again, that's when things were moving around there. Main Street, more than any other building, just got flipped last year, and they're flipping it back, so. And we are, in talking about kids and their needs and cafeterias being such an important thing, that we were looking at the cafeteria here. We got 5 different table types at the cafeteria here at the high school. We've got new cafeteria tables heading down to Roxbury, and we've got new ones over here that will give more flexibility in how kids gather. So just as an aside.
Just to build on that too, I mean, Andrew, you just mentioned kind of student needs, and I think actually the act of eating is oftentimes very secondary in the cafeteria, for better or worse. But it really is just the space where socially, like, there's so much need. It's the time for kids to let down. It's the time for kids to be social. And the food component is very, very critical. And the idea that we could do some, revamping of some of the, the kitchen equipment that might actually translate to better menus that kids might, eat more from, and enjoy more. There just seems to be so much potential, and it's just so much more beyond the word cafeteria in terms of really, it's really a wellness space. I think cafeterias are, in terms of the food access, I think we all know that, like, a lot of kids, once they leave school, they don't eat again, so that this meal is actually critical, and how they experience this meal is critical. So, it seems like it really is, it's a very practical project. There's a lot of pragmatics involved, but there's also just in terms of our ability to support students in this space, sounds very necessary, and it's a great opportunity, and also there sounds like there's just some really cool creative solutions too.
And even on the physiological, as Jim Birmingham pointed out when I first met him, was the cafeterias. The cafeterias are the one of the most important, biggest classrooms these kids are going to ever do. If they learn how to eat right when they're young, think of the benefits that's going to have. I'm a generation who didn't learn to eat right, and I'm suffering from it now. But
the kitchen, like we're going to get to, they don't make food there,
they
right?
more now than ever before. Okay. Or I would say more now than ever before in that kitchen.
They can, and it's limited still. They
it's
can't
still limited,
make the same meals that they make at the high school here in this kitchen. But you can go to the next slide. We can talk about the kitchen.
Jim has made a real effort to increase as much food production in that kitchen for the kids. There is some limitations. We have actually started to meet with kitchen consultants. I kind of, behind Libby's back, worked with Jim and said, let's just get the ball rolling. In that, not actually behind, because there was so much talk, actually probably more behind your back than anybody, because we talked about what do we need for a kitchen. And I said, if we keep thinking about what we need for a kitchen, we're never going to do anything. So let's see what we can do with the kitchen we have. And, because the reality of it is we may be, we may be in this space, in this box for the next 20 years, and we can't really ignore it.
One thing. So I just want to provide context for this crew. It was over 2 years ago at our retreat where we were coming off of the big bond projects, or wrapping up the big bond projects at UES and the high school, where we did a lot of great work, including the playground, which I know we didn't get 100% of everything that we wanted because there were risks associated with that project. And unfortunately, it cost way more than anticipated because of hazardous waste mitigation. But still, we have a great new playground there. And MSMS, the board really felt like, and we were hearing it from the community, this is a fairly neglected space, especially in terms of like some key elements. And these are some of the key elements. And so we put together this MSMS building committee that didn't complete its work because of COVID-19, but we did a lot of the work. And quite frankly, these spaces that Andrew's pointing to were the spaces that group, which included city council members, range of community members, identified as like acute needs for our district. So when we're talking about
Yeah,
some of these things, it comes out of some of that work. So I just wanted to lay that context out there.
And Amanda, do you have a comment or question?
I just have a question on Roxbury.
So this space, in meeting with our kitchen consultant, I wouldn't say he's our kitchen consultant quite yet, but the kitchen consultant we brought in, the actual physical, biggest challenge we have at that kitchen is storage. You see one freezer there, we've got 2 or 3 more just that size. That's kind of out in the cafeteria right now. Last year it was up in a conference room. If we can solve the storage, the actual cooking gallery is not all that bad. It's not a pleasant place to work, and we need for our staff to improve that. We need, luckily, those blocked up windows. Gosh, the energy crisis really did some number on a lot of our buildings. We can pop windows in there. We can get ventilation. We can get natural sunlight in there for our workers, which is going to make them, imagine just going down in there and getting your meal into this dark, dank kitchen, versus something that's light and bright and clean, and it's a different mindset. So anyway, there's a real need down there and a real challenge, but the real linchpin of it all is really our food storage. The more they can store, the more they can prepare.
It's tough to see in this picture, but that's a galley kitchen.
Yeah.
You're not seeing any more. There's no space that goes this way that you can't see.
Yeah.
Right. So it's really tight. It's hot. That space also, it's my understanding that when Tropical Storm Irene came through, that was a completely flooded space.
I can believe that.
And that was an opportunity to truly do something with it. And it wasn't. It was put back pretty much the way it was prior to the damage. So that's a definite need that we have.
Yeah.
Is there, I mean, I can stay at the 20,000 foot level, but I'm just so curious, is there talk about expanding the footprint somehow of the space, or would it be
the challenge,
the confines of that?
The challenge with that is behind those back walls is about a 10, 12, I'm going to guess that the back lot, somebody may know better than I, that the not offset property.
The fire.
There's a fire lane back there, but your property offset's like 10 feet on the back and the sides. We're about that. We go into not Amanda Buckley. We go into a property right there. Yeah. Angela. Yeah, it's Angela's house is right there. Her backyard is right there. So there's not much room to go out that way. To go out into the Franklin Street side, suddenly you're eating up parking, which is, traditionally never a great thing, but we live in a city. You can park on the street. That's why we have them. But we also have a 10,000 gallon oil tank out there. So it's tight. There's no easy solutions, but some cool opportunities. We'll figure it out. Any other questions or pieces on Main Street Middle?
Has there been any discussion of, I can't really believe I'm going to say this, but this isn't quite 20,000, it's probably more 40,000 foot, just knock it down and start over? I don't know. Yes. I'm so sorry to have brought that up. I know
the only thing, I shouldn't be flip.
We have talked about that. Yeah. We talked about it in the Main Street Middle School committee.
Yeah.
We did discuss that.
It was certainly one of the options that, frankly, we were, just as the pandemic hit, and we might want to we had that presentation pretty much teed up. It might be worthwhile to bring that up.
Yeah, and it was
the next month or two.
Yeah, and it was 20 years ago when I don't know if it was Gossens or Black River, did a study. That building 25 years ago, somebody put the seed, said, it's no good, we don't need it. And so for 15 years, it got neglected. And then 10, 15 years ago, he said, it's here. It isn't going anywhere anytime quick. So let's reinvest. And that's what we've been doing. It's not that school, it's Montpelier. There's not a lot of land.
Yeah, that was kind of the conversation that we started with the MSMS committee, which is we've got a public building. It's over 100 years old. We put money into it. Some of that has been more visible than others, but kind of like your old car. Sometimes you put a lot of money into your old car and it's a lot of money and all it does is keep it running.
Yep.
So some of the, I think, original thoughts we had, obviously COVID threw this all off track, was, do we level it and build anew? Do we do like a major renovation where we just go in and maybe keep the facade in the location, but got it to the point where we had to move kids out for a couple of years,
Right.
and like really retool it and kind of make the space anew? Or do we, find other ways to make sure it meets the kids' needs?
So we're more on the last one.
I think that's where we are by default. Although, I mean, there have been investments that have made a big difference.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And anybody that's been in that building, I don't know when the last time, a lot of us, we haven't been in those buildings in a long time. And I keep looking at Annika because I know his daughter and I know the time. The little gym, or the gym over there, doesn't look like the gym anymore. The peeling insulation and the brown ceiling, they don't look like that anymore. People are going to be pretty psyched. I wish the scoreboards will be up before school started, just because it doesn't look like a neglected elementary school multi-purpose space anymore. It looks like a gym. And so luckily, a lot of those mechanical stuff, that stuff that was behind the scenes that you couldn't see, is done. So we can, like this year, we put new carpets and ceilings and lighting in the library. Some of the old windows that had plastic on them that drove Libby crazy, somebody was over there fixing those. Yeah, so we are starting to make those improvements. So
I don't think I saw a slide on History Middle School for the windows.
it was there.
Okay.
Yeah.
It was in there.
Okay.
And just for the record, my daughter is fully in favor of a rebuild.
You looked excited about that. You looked excited about
She
that.
asked me many times, when are we going to knock the middle school down and build like a really nice big new one?
So here at the high school, the high school, and I let's think about the projects and things that are at the high school. A lot of it is, the biggest one you will get right out there is the track. In the track, there's been a lot of conversation and a lot of support and a lot of enthusiasm to do things out there. We have an immediate need to do some safety things to it. We need to make it fundamentally safe. We've been working on that, and I'm going to be putting some money into the budget this year, and we're going to do that. Where we go from there, I've got people that say, you know what, if we had artificial turf out there, we could hold every state championship and we could charge X amount of dollars and we could be the hub for sporting events, just like Burlington and South Burlington is, in Chittenden County, where you go for the state lacrosse championship, you go to Burlington. We could potentially be that kind of space. Whether we want to be that kind of space or not, no, that's for somebody else to answer. But the track cascades. It can go from, all right, well, we had a great track program here last year, racing on cinder. I don't think the surface necessarily is holding us back from achieving things, but we have it great. So if we have a better track, can we do even better? Can we have the community come in here? Can we offer different opportunities? Can we attract parents? I mean, parents, when they hit middle school, start thinking about, where do I want my kids, based somewhat on athletic facilities and their athletic programs, for sure. So, but the biggest unknown with this is, where does it stop? Okay, if we put a paved track with an athletic surface, well, certainly we're going to want to do our pole vaulting pits and our long jump pits and our shot put. And if we got all the equipment on there, well, we sure as heck got to get rid of the topsoil that is our baseball field. We got to get clay in there. I may put that in this, try to get that in this year, but because we're going to spend as much time with John out there weeding our baseball field than just spending $5,000 on some clay and being done with it. Lights, grandstands, concession stands, restrooms, new storage facilities. You're gonna build this track, and the track program, you're gonna need to play. You're not gonna spend $10,000 on a pole vaulting mat and just leave it laying out in the snow all winter. You're gonna need a storage facility for that. So it just sort of cascades, and it was a fabulous athletics year last year. I think we were all very, very proud and excited about 5 state championships is pretty good. So that's a big conversation, but it's out there. So one of the other needs that we have here is a transition space for high intensity needs students. And Libby can correct me, but we have a program, we have a space where we teach life skills. We'd like to really make it almost a teaching apartment where we can teach folks who are transitioning from the school system out into the world, you know, to have an actual residential bathroom, tub and shower and kitchen facility and laundry facility that someone can actually we can really teach those skills. We've made great progress. This was one of the first things I did here when I was handed a half-completed kitchen and said, you got 2 weeks to finish it. I was like, oh, okay. But that's a project here at the high school that is in need. Throughout the district, tonight, the city is getting their net zero presentation from Efficiency Vermont. I know it's ECIC, whatever it's called. They're Efficiency Vermont to me. They have some ideas that they're going to share with the public regarding that. I have a preview of, I saw a preview of the report. We are the biggest users of energy. We use 40% of the energy. Don't quote me on these numbers. We use like 40% of the energy in the public buildings. We get 60% of the space. We do pretty good, and we've done really well. Thanks to the good work of my predecessor and Tom Allen, I think our electrical use has gone down something like 40% in the last 10 years. I mean, we've done good work. There's more opportunities. It's, again, we're hemmed in. We're a city schools. You know, some of the things that are going to be presented, and you guys will probably be hearing about of, hey, why don't we do this? And hey, no, I don't that. Because, you know, if you guys will come out here and you'll watch a field hockey game, you'll be standing on a road. That's the outline for the field hockey, you know, field is right there. We don't have a lot of space, but we are going to definitely make those improvements. We would be foolish of us not to. When we started the process down at Roxbury with a heat pump project that you guys approved, there was just no way it was going to get built this year. So we've kind of kicked it, and we're going to do it in the spring. There was just no contractors available to do it, or equipment, really, quite honestly. So that's out there. We still don't know what those are, and I wouldn't be surprised if in the infrastructure bills and things like that, there's a lot of very much like this can be used for that. You know, like I can't believe that it won't be that way. A lot of what I'm just going to finish up last thing. A lot of the things at the high school are going to be the smaller things, the furniture, the way the way the library is set up, a lot of those things. But those are, you know, smaller projects that will certainly come up in the conversations in the coming year. Any questions about the high school?
Can I just clarify this? The slide where you had the track listed.
Yeah. You
really were talking about like all of our fields.
I just don't know how it's, no, because yes and no. Yes, in that it would be silly not to take care, if we did the track and a track program, pole vaulting and shot put and all that, to regrade the baseball field is going to be nothing. You know, that's going to be a drop in the, you know, into.
Right.
But, and yes, in that if we build that track, we've got a shed out there that we keep all of our mowers and our equipment. Well, if we build a track, we're not going to drive over it anymore. And we've already decided that we're not going to drive over it anyway, but we're going to have to move that and put that somewhere else. So it's more of an opportunity. We have been pulling rocks and boulders out of our practice fields, and we've gotten better and better. But 10 years ago, the practice field was used as a overflow parking lot for Circus Marcus, and they put in drainage pipe, and it was never properly redressed. And you know, so some of our practice fields, it would be the time to do that. And again, if you're going to focus all this, and maybe we do it, maybe we wouldn't, but I think it would snowball very quickly. Or snowball is probably the wrong word, but
blossom.
Blossom.
I just want to, Jerry, you were blocked out by the presentation. I just want to give you some space to ask any questions or comments if you have any. If not, no problem. But we could not see what you were doing.
No, I love the presentation. And there are a lot of big ideas. We'll see how it all shakes out, but great ideas.
Thanks. Amanda?
So for Roxbury, I noticed that there was just like the gazebo and the community hall. Is there like anything in the actual building that needs to happen or like
Again, I would say that in Roxbury, one of the good things about Roxbury is that it's, there are certainly projects that if we, as we go through, it needs new casework, it needs new casework. That's $60,000. That we can do that. So there's no real, and that heat pump project, that's on par. It's a small building, so we're able, there's four classrooms, pre-K, and so it's in good shape. It's in good shape, and it still needs maintenance and all that. But no, there's nothing down there that if we during budget season we said we really need this, that I don't think it would fall too far out of the normal sort of that's what we should be doing down there this year.
In the last 2 years, we put in new bathrooms. We put in a new kitchen. We've done some major work there in the last 2 years.
Just to follow up on that, would you say then that it's at that 21st century education level that you were talking about envisioning for something like the little gym or the multi-purpose room?
No, again, certainly Beth has talked to me about some, and I apologize, sometimes I don't use it right, it's a sensory room that she wants to create down there. But again, it's one room, it's relatively small, it's within the realm of what we normally would do. But
okay.
But yeah.
Just thinking, if we had that, like when the experts come in that you're imagining we would team up with at Union, I think having them also visit Roxbury and say these are the same things that we would suggest or whatever, just to have that same attention paid.
Sure. And it may and again, as a standalone project, we might say let's just do it all down at Roxbury now. Let's do all the casework all at once, do a sensory room, let's do the town hall and just do that all at once as one big project, because the bigger your projects are, the cheaper they are. When you start to do things in small chunks, they're more expensive.
Right.
You want to throw out that last slide?
So, Andrew, thank you for the presentation. Really, really good information. A few questions. I guess I'll start with, you had a lot of really important things highlighted here. In terms of funding and what could be done, is there what's the thought process? Oh, we could get all of this done, or no, we were going to get only this much done, or how do you figure that out?
Nice segue, Andrew. Go ahead, Grant.
Yeah, so Andrew got 24 slides. I get this one.
But it's one that makes it all.
But it's the important one.
And actually, this is just a quick slide to show the scope of money that we're talking about. It also indicates, as you can see, whether the funding source is federal or local, whether it's an annual amount of money that we see, or whether it's a one-time amount or one-time influx of funds. Even without a solid infrastructure number, you can see this is a considerable amount of money that could be available to improve learning spaces. So really, I didn't want to get into the specifics of every number on here, but I did want to at least give you the idea that we're not talking about a few $100,000. We're talking about a considerable amount of money. And as you can see, a lot of it is money that we have. It's our fund balance, and that fund balance amount is, as it says, unreserved. Our real fund balance is like $3 million. We're going to use that as a source of revenue for budgets coming up in the following years. And we do assume that we're going to want to keep like a 2% amount that's available for emergencies. That amount is what I'm saying you could truly spend right now and we'd be okay. The capital fund, this year's budget is $250,000 for the capital in FY22. We figured it would probably go up about $10,000 every year. So there's about $250,000 every year that'll be in the budget that typically gets good support by the voters. We have that plan already mapped out through like FY27, but we always, every year during budget, we refresh that. Priorities might change. Andrew mentioned one of the big things on there, or two of the big things on there, are the UES and MSMS windows, which we were going to put money aside every year. But by doing it that way, we weren't going to fully fund those projects until I think FY28. So if we did it that way, if we leave it in the capital plan, that's how those would be funded. But it's a considerable amount of money that's available to us. So it's really a time where we should be looking at priorities and thinking about what we want to start focusing on and talk to the community about. The other thing I would just say is some of these do have a clock ticking, like ESSER 3, that money has to be spent by September 30th, 2024. I'm not sure what the infrastructure funding timeline will be. The local piece, the capital fund, that can carry over year to year. The fund balance is available to you whenever you decide to use it. So anyhow, that's just a quick look at the money, the sources, the kind of big amounts that could be used for this.
And that ESSER 3 money, is that the full amount there, or is that the amount that could be used?
Yeah, that's
Full amount.
that's our full allocation. Obviously, part of that is going to be used toward learning loss, but a chunk of that could be used for this.
And then a certain percentage needs
That
to
was
be
my question.
used.
20% needs to be.
20%, right? Yeah.
That's
So
20%.
not all of that money is,
Yeah, if you did 80% of that, it's probably 1.75, something like that, that would be available. But the language is at least 20% for learning loss.
All right.
And then I do appreciate that this is not the conversation about ESSER 3, but it seems like the feedback we've been getting from the community is that we don't want to just use that 20% as if it's the only amount that we're gonna use to address learning loss, and therefore we have 80% of what's up there on infrastructure. So just at that big picture level, to be thinking about that as not exactly 2.23 million, but maybe half that, or
Yeah,
I don't know.
as I said-
And of course, the amount that that big question mark is a really big question mark. The infrastructure funding could be.
And it could be zero because of what's going on with Afghanistan now.
Yeah.
But I don't know. And you're right, the language is at least 20% has to be used to learning loss. So it's definitely at least 20% less than this, if not more. The one thing, since we're talking a little bit about federal funds, the one thing you have to really be careful of is these things are only temporary. So the one thing that AOE has been kind of hammering on us is try to be real careful about building something that's a recurring requirement, because once you do that and this money goes away, then your local taxpayers are either going to have to bear the expense of keeping that moving, or you're going to have to stop it. So to the extent that you can invest in, more like one-time requirements or requirements that are short-term, that maybe you can focus on something for 2 or 3 years and then wean yourself off. So there's a lot to talk about there that goes way beyond this. But this, once again, is just to give you an idea of the scope of what we're talking about. I didn't want you to think, wow, we've got 24 slides of things, and what do we have? Like a couple 100,000? No, we got a lot more than that. So we could really make a dent at this if we could come up with consensus on which things we want to focus on.
So I think for me, it will be really helpful this environmental study, because I think it ties in really good with some of the concerns that families are bringing up around the social and emotional learning and just like spaces. So just like when I'm like in this 30, I'm like, here's all the needs and here's what we have. So I feel like I'm right here, like kind of like in that 40,000 foot of dreaming, like looking down and seeing like, oh, this is all the things that we could do, but I don't feel like I have all the needs overall, right? Like overall, here are all the needs, here's all this money, and here's all the, like, it seems in my, that's how I feel.
I could maybe build on that, and kind of going in a similar direction, thinking about the question of like, what information will we need and want to support like an informed prioritization process, and how much of that is like data driven, how much of that is, community input and student voice, and So I guess that's just a, question for maybe even just down the line to be thinking about, but just what will a prioritization process look like? And then of course also the financial piece, and just how that will all be weighed out. And I guess this is somewhat connected too, is that these are all really, really exciting projects and they're really, really fun to think about. And I also, when I think back to your report, I was actually thinking about the casing at RVS, like some of the less glamorous projects, but that are kind of punch listy projects, like kind of where would those fall that sort of support like day-to-day functionality?
Yeah, that falls in our local budget.
Okay, so
Yeah,
that'll just
so
stay
those
there.
those are in a different pot of money altogether, because those kind of checklist things, Andrew and his team think about and budget for. So you'll hear more about that during budget time.
I want to just piggyback off of Kristen's first question about what the prioritization and the decision-making process. And then just my question is about the board. Our role is significantly different than yours. Which of these decisions are operational decisions, which land in the administration's purview, and which of these decisions are, or not decisions necessarily, but where does the board, what do you need from us? Are we the community engagement gathering? Are we we bounce ideas off of each other? I really appreciate that we're having this conversation so early on at this like brainstorming level. And I wonder about like when the time comes to make decisions, I think it's going to be you two making these decisions, right? What more would you want from the board in order to make those decisions?
What I'm hearing is that and correct me if I'm wrong, what I'm hearing based on our conversations yesterday and today is that they want, and as a board, we can discuss how we want to do this, that they're looking for input on how to prioritize these big projects. This isn't like the annual maintenance work that we budget for year over year.
For sure.
These are big projects that community members have been coming to us about for a long time. Like the Main Street Middle School projects, people have been talking about those projects for, I don't know, you'd know better than I would.
Yeah, I mean, I think some of those concerns have existed for as long as I've existed.
So what my interpretation of this is, and correct me if I'm wrong, Libby and Andrew, is we've received a lot of community input over the years, and we should definitely engage the community in this conversation still. I'm not saying we shouldn't, but that's where a lot of these big projects came from. And it's like, okay, we have quite a bit of money right now. I mean, let's be real, $3.5-4 million, that's not going to go very far with some of these projects. So, I think they're looking for priorities from us. What do we want to prioritize? And we can go about engaging the community to determine those priorities. But a lot of these are projects that we've had community members in the past year bring up a number of these with us. You know what I mean?
And let me just say, I mean, infrastructure is tricky. I mean, there's a few challenges with it. For one, it's generally not on anyone's dream list because, if you have money, fixing that rotted sill in your house is not one of those things that you get too excited about doing, but it's very necessary. I think another thing about the community is, I mean, ever since I've been on the board, and before I've been on the board, a lot of big infrastructure projects gets wrapped up in, but we should merge with U32. Or some other big thing, like why would we build a new middle school, or why would we invest in a new middle school when we should instead be thinking about merging with U32 and turn the high school into middle school. Like I don't want to spend money on that. So getting past some of that too is, I think, a challenge for us, and really thinking about because the community has big dreams, but sometimes big dreams can get in the way of practical things that need to happen, and dreaming big on the scale that we need to be dreaming big on, which is, kind of reimagining a middle school rather than saying, well, that building's going to become obsolete when we merge with U32, which is another thing we've been talking about since before Emma's been here.
Yeah, I've heard less about it recently, actually.
I think because U32 has some challenges right now. So.
Settled down, it was like not as much of a priority topic.
Well, I heard it just 3 weeks ago in my office. So it's on people's minds, I think, still, but.
So what I hear you saying is you would be looking for us throughout this process, just on some input, just like, this is what we're hearing.
I think that
make decisions.
Again, a lot of this is very, our thinking had to change relatively recently because some of the projects we were thinking about that we said, well, that doesn't really fall under ESSER 3 or whatever. Suddenly they could, and it was like, oh, and then we started thinking about all these other numbers, and Grant finished up with quarterly reports and all that. I was like, okay, let's come up with the list of all those needs, and then so I think the process has just started, so I'm not 100% sure, and there needs to be more conversation about.
There's definitely some decisions, like if the community really wants a track, like we'll just use that as an example, because that's an enormous ticket item, right? And if the board says, yes, but we don't want to bond it, we want to use the money we have available in order to do that, then that will change our list considerably, right? That project list that you saw that was like 20 projects now becomes 5. So then it's, okay, yeah, we can do that. We can make that decision. And then we need to rethink some other things, right? Do we want the track and the cafeteria kitchen combo at MSMS? That could very well be it, right? And maybe the small gym in the auditorium. So there's some things that if there's a big ticket item there, then that will influence other decisions. And we cannot forget about the windows. You know, if you think of Maslow's theory, where basic safety and health enables everything else to happen, a kid who's freezing in a classroom or a teacher who's freezing in a classroom cannot do their best work. And those we have safety issues at UES. There have been kids who've tried to jump out of the windows. Like there's a lot of things with those windows that we really need to consider. And that's not the exciting project. That's the mold in your sill or whatever that Jim was talking about. And it's also a big ticket item. So there's some more necessity than wants as well.
One thing I heard brought up several times was about lighting, and something that I learned throughout the course of my time on the board and going through the buildings, and also just with some of the projects we've had lately, is we've done a lot of upgrades to lighting. So would you mind just touching upon that for a second? Because I did hear that.
Well, basically, most classrooms now have dimmable LED lights in them. So most, and I would say most spaces are dimmable at this point. But most of our common areas in our classrooms, every year we do 2 or 3 classrooms in each building to put in new LED lighting. And we're pretty darn close on most all of our buildings at this point. I mean, there's some bigger spaces that we haven't quite done. But
we've also done some work at the Main Street Middle School main hallway on office library floor. That was really dark 2 years ago, and now it's very bright. Or it's, you know, it's an enjoyable space rather than a dark one. Also, the UES entryway was really dark.
We put in new lighting over at Franklin Street entrance tower, which is really kind of cool. And if anybody's heading over to Main Street Middle School, look in that stair tower tonight. It looks really nice. All the corridor ceilings over at Main Street Middle School, all the bent tobacco stained ceiling tiles, those are all that's all been redone and with new lighting in there.
Yeah, you did the 3rd floor at UES.
You did the 3rd floor, yeah. So it's been an ongoing thing.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one of the things, maybe it's just me, but that will help me, is I know it's too early, but maybe just really, really rough numbers to understand hey, this is really a big ticket item that's going to replace, that's going to take like 6 items here because they're, $20,000, $30,000, and this is a, $600,000. And maybe again, as I said, it's too early, but having that number early on may at least help me to kind of put that into perspective. Okay, well, this is really big ticket item. These 5 are not small, but they are kind of equivalent to that. And that can, if I'm having conversations with other people and trying to get their feedback, that'll help me put into perspective, at least during the conversation, that look, we have this and we have that.
And I think as we get there, and we will have to get there, we will be better to serve to refer to them not as cost estimates, but relative cost estimates.
Sure.
Such that we can say, the little gym at Main Street or at Union is $200,000. The cafeteria at middle school, they're not going to be right, but they'll be where they're wrong. They'll be wrong together. So at least we know that this one's more expensive than this one, and We really, and quite honestly, with construction as it is, we won't know until we get the bids on our desk.
In terms of time frame, if we're not talking about federal dollars, Andrew really likes to go out to bid for things in January. Because then that gets the process going and we're ready for summer. Because if you think about the building months of a school district, it's summer and summer alone. You don't want construction people coming through a school building where there's children here, right? So really we have a limited building window, a little limited construction window. So Andrew goes out in January to deal that process. So definitely, as we hit the fall and the winter, we'll have lots of budget conversations, and probably within there, we'll want to make some decisions about, what's 2022 summer project.
Yeah, and the timing of design and consideration. There's some spaces, and you talk about lighting. The good thing about it is technology, lighting, and you can think of the yellow fluorescent horrible lighting that we all grew up with. We now can go into LED, and it's not that big of a change to do some LED where you can change the tone of the lighting so that if you're having in the little gym, you're having a basketball game, you can have it nice and bright. But if you're having a smaller, quieter group that's doing something quiet, you can do a softer light. That technology is very accessible now. But some of these things, if we say, yeah, it's just got to be done. The little gym is terrible. We got to get it done. Let's do it. That's relatively easy. We can put that bid package together relatively quickly. Get some input from folks, get some, talk amongst ourselves, the administrators and the PE teachers and anybody, special educators, how are we going to use the space? What are we going to do? We can get that out. Something like the track, that could potentially take you a year to get all the feedback of what we want to do, what we need, and then the permitting and soil samples and all that kind of stuff. So some of these projects can happen very quickly. Some of them, are going to take a long time.
Some of them are riskier too, as we were talking about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In terms of like the price like we saw with the UES playground compared to like the little gym.
Work in this building in Roxbury, you can pretty much know what you're going to have when you start opening up a wall. Main Street and Union.
And my house, you can throw that in.
Yeah, I don't know how to answer this question, but I think another factor as you are making decisions is what are the equity considerations? And I know, at one level, there's the 21st century education space and the neurodiversity, not accommodations, but design for neurodiversity. But I also wonder about when it comes to prioritization of projects. That's where I think about how does equity factor in? I don't know how to answer that question. And so maybe one thing I will do is just keep thinking on that a little bit more and just ask all of us to, because one way to think about it, and I think you have a little bit in that what you are working to address are the needs that need to happen, and not just okay, well, every school is going to get a fresh coat of paint, because that would be, not oh, now everybody's getting the same thing. But you're looking at what are the needs at each individual school. So you're already starting down that path, but I wonder what's the next way that we bring it in. And I think community engagement is one way, but again, I don't know exactly how we can try and factor equity in to the prioritization process even more.
When I think about that list, I think it shows you the two special education spaces being the UES, what is really an office suite right now.
Yeah.
And
The multi-purpose room?
the transition space here.
Oh, yeah.
At the high school.
Thank you. Yeah.
That for me is a high priority.
Yeah.
To help service our students in a much better way. So from my perspective, that is a priority, most definitely. It may need selling, however.
I just
Can I have
Amanda.
I think for me, so these conversations around the infrastructure, which I don't actually feel so much to do community engagement on, you want this, these are building structures that are very tied to equity and which are very student centered. And so for me, it's in order to prioritize, it's just having those two windows to to the system itself. So one is like the concerns that we heard in Roxbury, the concerns that we heard in the last community meeting, the concern that we heard this morning, and how that is like, how we're looking at the big picture. And if there are other pots of money, so like having that, being able to see that plan, like here are some of the concerns that we're hearing from the community, here's how we're addressing them, here's how we're putting money into that, and then like here's that. So I think for me, it's hard in my brain to kind of see the packet by itself without seeing the system in place when it comes to prioritization. Like, do I prioritize this, that, you know, that is like students are suffering, or do I prioritize the windows that also, you know, like, so just being able to see this whole system will be really helpful.
I have an idea for that, but I'll try to get it after, just like a way to visually represent maybe some of this that would help the prioritization thinking thought process.
I just wanted to follow up with what Mia was saying before about gathering community input. Some of our best organized community members aren't necessarily advocating for the most equitable outcomes.
Yeah.
Like I've received a lot with regard to facilities. I've received exponentially more emails, phone calls, comments from community members, friends, neighbors related to like one specific sport than I have that I forget what you're calling it, Libby, the space to help our high school students. Transitional space. I'm not certain I've ever received community input that we really need that, but that doesn't mean that we don't need that.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That doesn't, just because those aren't the dominant voices that are like showing up in my inbox year after year on the sport, doesn't mean that like we shouldn't put a certain weight on those needs. So that I don't know exactly how to thread that needle, but I just wanted to bring that up for the board's consideration as well.
Emma?
If we were to add another funding source in the form of a bond for something like the track, could you give me an idea of what the timeline would be on preparing that for a ballot?
We talked a little bit about, I think it would be realistic. And I'll throw I know school, this is my thought. This is not, and I'm not on a school board and I've worked with plenty of them. There's some school boards that say, let's put something out in November. So if it fails, we can make adjustments and put it back out in March at town meeting. Again, I don't think a lot of school boards don't like to have things that might fail. They kind of like to know that they've got the support that things pass. But to some degree on something like the track, maybe that is no, certainly you would. I don't think you'd be in a position before next November to be able to put something out in front of the public that was well thought out, well researched, and well cost estimated.
You mean not by November?
Not this November, next
November
November.
22.
A year and
Okay,
3
you don't
months.
think we'd be able to be prepared to put out a bond by November 2022? So we would be waiting for March 2023 potentially, if we were to consider that as one of the.
I would think so. I just engineers are straight out. I mean, there's that too. I mean, it's a big project and it would take some time to meet with the different groups and find out what we want, you know.
Yeah.
And when you meet once every 2 weeks, you know, what kind of track surface do we want?
Yeah.
Well, that can take you 2 months to figure out. What kind of mats are we gonna use? Where are we gonna put them? How are we gonna store them? You know, all that kind of stuff. What do we want for concession stands? Well, who's gonna run them? Well, the parent booster group. Okay, well, we ought to include them. And all that stuff just takes so much time.
Mm-hmm.
That I think it'd take you a couple months just to see what would fit out there, let alone what it's gonna look like and how you're gonna make it.
And that would be a similar timeline if we were to use some of these other funding sources.
I think the track is definitely the piece that's going to take you the most time.
longest.
Yeah,
Okay.
the track is definitely going to take you the most time.
Okay.
And again, some of these projects, we know what needs to be. We know what needs to be done at the little gym. There's absolutely a layer of input that would make it so much even better. But that we can.
That input's
can
more
take
from
care of.
Max and Emmanuel than.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I do want to be somewhat cognizant of time. I know we're
Yeah.
8:30, which is technically the end of the meeting, so one more item. One thing I think would be great, and I know we've talked about this before, is to make sure that we get the board out walking around the facilities and looking at some of these projects, because that I think could really be informative in terms of, I mean, it's one thing to see a picture of the MSMS cafeteria and kitchen. It's another thing to
That'll
spend some time in the space.
People's priorities.
Yeah.
Especially if you go during the school day. Oh, though,
Yeah.
we're not using the cafeteria this year.
No, we're using the cafeteria.
Yeah, so I suggest we get a tour, hopefully this fall, and maybe I can work with Libby and Andrew to get some dates. And unless any final questions or comments, we should probably.
I have a small question. I'll try to keep it straight to the point. I guess I want a little more clarity on whether or not we're ready to like take this out to community members. And I guess it feels a little bit kind of the essence because Jerry and I are having to circle up with Roxbury community on Sunday, and just like how we want to frame this, you know, to them, just so it feels accurate. I know there's some things that are still like a little bit amorphous in terms of funding and timelines and things like that. So how would we like best frame this if we were to ask for some community input at this point in time?
That's a tricky question because it goes to what Andrew was saying, is that people's perspectives are relatively narrow to their own experience, which is not a fault, you know, of anybody's. It's just how we view the world, right? So I think simply asking people around hopes and dreams for buildings, you know, for what our buildings and our learning spaces look like, and hopes and dreams for systems of learning, hopes and dreams for social emotional learning, you know, like. I think if you can frame it in those high end ways, that might help you as you come and say, this is what I heard, you know?
I would also note, just to be careful, like what Andrew brought up about the budget, the line item in grants, one slide on ESSER funding. Like I feel like that should be clearly explained that that's not all going to go for, you know, the plant. We can't legally use it all for infrastructure stuff. And so to show it as that full line item is a little misleading.
Yeah, and I would add that, you know, like the AOE also has like those buckets of what they envision, that, you know, we could ask those questions. Here are some of these buckets, like social emotional learning, truancy, like how do you envision that? Like what does that look like? What are the needs? What are your experiences? Because one thing is dreams, but also like the communities, the people on the ground that are experiencing the things that we might not be able to see. So it's like, how does that, you know, tie in with dreams? Because I think needs is really important too, which is what this is about. And the AOE has a really great little guidance about the little buckets that they're thinking about too. So.
Could I also add just one thing?
Yes.
I think it would be helpful if we had some kind of input from the staff, just as one data point to see how they would rank it in terms of prioritization and pain points. I think that would help when discussing with the larger community, to be able to say these are the things the staff ranked highest in terms of what they're seeing, and focus that, of course, on learning. I would always say learning is the highest priority, but then like you said, Libby, having gone to a very cold school myself, I wasn't able to focus when I was freezing to death. So so the windows are important.
We did that for MSMS. We pulled all the
Yeah,
staff.
and recognize when you pull staff members, they also have a narrow perspective of their own building,
Yeah,
right?
right.
MHS will not tell you that a track and a transition space are their priorities for this building. I can guarantee that. You know, they'll tell you we need more individual office space and individual learning spaces for kids. You know, but we need more flexible pathways offices. Like those are the things that they'll tell you here.
Storage.
That would be important for us.
Yeah.
Right now, we make decisions like that. What are they thinking? Because they are in the classroom, they are like feeling the cold. So, you know, like I think that it is important to see their perspective, even if it doesn't agree with what is like in the 20,000 foot level. But it's just like it gives us, it makes us think of informed decisions, which is what I aim in life. To make informed decisions.
Excellent. Thank you. This will definitely be a discussion that we will continue to have.
Thank you very much.
Yes, and again, let's make sure we get some tours on, because I think
Yep.
Those will change many of our also somewhat narrow perspectives on what these things are.
Thank you.
Great.
Thanks, guys. Drive safe, Grant.
So we have two policy monitoring reports. Title I, Part A, parental involvement, and then that's of 12, and then A01, board member conflict of interest. Let's do the first one. Do I have a motion to approve the F12 policy?
I'll move to approve F12 policy report.
Yeah, thank you. Do I have a second? Any discussion?
I have one question. On the policy under school level, so not district level, but school level parental involvement, it includes, there's a process for continually involving parents in the development and implementation of the compact itself. So I'm curious what that might look like at
That's
the
actually
school level.
old, that's actually out of date language. It's not a requirement anymore.
Okay,
So the compact itself is out of, we don't need it in terms of ESSER. When ESSER, which is the new educational law, newest, I should say.
so the law, but not the funding.
Right.
Oh, man.
Yeah, sorry.
That's very confusing. Okay,
Yeah,
but I'm with
sorry.
you. I'm with you now.
That no longer is part of that, so that's old language. I think I say something in the bottom. Do I say something in the
Let me
policy monitoring about that? I believe I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is not.
Oh,
So-
ESSA, yes, okay.
So that's an old, compact that was built, and I can tell you a process that we used in other districts and stuff, but that's just what we had.
So is there some level of parental involvement in designing anything at the school level anymore?
For a compact, specifically, no, because we
No.
just use the same one every year.
Okay, got it.
We haven't done any parental involvement in that part for a long time.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. And then motion on A01, board member conflict of interest. We have a motion to approve the board member conflict of interest policy monitoring report. Second from Emma. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, vote pass. Motion to adjourn.
So move.
Oh, that one thing, but I'll leave it for the next meeting.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a good night. Thanks all.
Everybody.
Libby was thinking about